President Maduro arrives in Qatar as part of his international tour intended to enhance relations with allied countries. Ecuadorian security forces repressed indigenous organizations who were demonstrating nationwide in rejection of the economic and social policies of Guillermo Lazo's government. Their leader, Leonidas Isa Salazar, was arrested on early Tuesday morning. According to Burkinabe government spokesperson Lionel Bilgo, at least 50 civilians have died in an attack by suspected jihadists on a village in the north part of the country, describing the killings as a revenge attack. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, in this are the news. President Nicolás Maduro Moros arrives in Qatar as part of his international tour of solidarity and collaboration. Nicolás Maduro, the president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, who is currently engaged in an international tour aimed at boosting solidarity, cooperation and trade with nations primarily in Asia and the Middle East, has just arrived in Qatar and is expected to make a declaration and hold an exchange at the highest official level. At the end of his first official visit to the state of Kuwait, the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, highlighted the agreements made during his meetings with high government officials from the Middle East nation.
We decided to activate a high-level joint commission with specific plans for cooperation in political and diplomatic fields, to continue intensive cooperation in the oil and gas industries, and to strengthen OPEC. Concerning investments, we invited the Kuwait Fund for Arab Economic Development and private businessmen to invest in Venezuela in the fields of tourism, energy, and trade.
On this first official visit of Venezuelan President to Kuwait, Nicolás Maduro was welcomed at the Royal Palace, where he met with the country's first minister and other government officials. The Venezuelan head of state paid his first official visit to that Asian nation to bolster bilateral ties. During this occasion, Maduro met the incoming OPEC Secretary General Haytham Al-Ghais, Kuwait's Prime Minister Sheikh Sabah Khalid Al-Hama Al-Sabah, the Crown Prince His Highness Mishal Al-Hamad Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, as well as other top officials and authorities. In his farewell remarks, Maduro referred to both nations' intentions to cooperate in agriculture and oil production, as well as to bolster relations in other areas. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, in the framework of his official visit to Kuwait, met on Tuesday with the incoming Secretary General of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, Kuwait's Haytham Al-Ghais. The Venezuelan head of state, whose country has the largest crude reserves in the world, and Al-Ghais, who will formally take office next August, discussed the direction in which they should work together with the other OPEC member nations, according to official sources. As part of his official activities, the president of the South American nation also met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the president of the Kuwait Economic Fund, Ahmed Nasser Al-Mohammed Al-Sabah. President Maduro arrived in Kuwait with the purpose of expanding bilateral relations at all levels under the principles of mutual respect and self-determination of peoples, with a view to defending multilateralism. Indigenous people protested on Monday in Atalay do Norte, a remote Amazonian reserve, over the disappearance of British journalist Dom Phillips and the indigenous expert Bruno Pereira. Mayoruna indigenous communities demanded evidence of life of those who were at last seen near the indigenous reserve of Rajavari and Valley on June the 5th. They also demanded better protection from the federal government against the illegal invasion of their lands by loggers, fishermen, and drug traffickers. Indigenous leaders argued that Bolsonaro's government has refused to protect inhabitants of the Javari Reserve, home to more than 6,000 tribesmen.
I am very sad about the disappearance of Bruno and Tom Phillips. Today it was them, yesterday it was Maxiel, and tomorrow who will it be? Then we tell the Bolsonaro's government that we are here, that this is our land and we will defend it to the last consequences.
Bolsonaro's government is responsible for the hatred and anger. He is the one who brought these bad people and even the virus.
And Brazil is awaiting the experts' reports on 2 bodies found in the Amazon that could correspond to Don Phillips, the collaborator of the British media The Guardian, and Bruno Pereira, a Brazilian indigenous, both missing for a week. Our correspondent in Sao Paulo, Ignacio Lemus, with the details.
Last June the 5th, British journalist Don Phillips and indigenous activist Bruno Pereira disappeared in the Vale do Javari, a reserve in the Brazilian Amazon, near the border with Colombia and Peru. Both were interviewing indigenous communities affected by the invasion of extractive industries.
The government of Mr. Jair Bolsonaro is directly responsible for this situation of increased violence against the indigenous peoples of Brazil, for acting as a government by encouraging those sectors that cause deforestation, illegal mining, exploitation of water resources, and the eviction of indigenous peoples from these territories for the advancement of agribusinesses, mainly in the Brazilian Amazon.
The indigenous communities of Vale do Javari are asking for justice. Bruno Pereira was threatened for collaborating in the defense of indigenous territories abandoned by the Brazilian government. The former official of the government entity for indigenous protection, FUNAI, was exonerated by the Ministry of Justice of the Bolsonaro government in 2019. During the administration of the then Minister Sergio Moro, former judge in the Lava Jato case. The reason? Bruno Pereira denounced illegal miners in an operation that ended with the destruction of 60 rafts of invaders. In other words, he was expelled for doing his job well, and although he had served for 23 years, the Brazilian president considered him to be improvised.
Only 2 people on a boat in a region like that, completely wild, is an adventure that is not recommended.
In 2019, Don Phillips had questioned Bolsonaro's anti-environmental policies.
New deforestation numbers show a scary increase. IBAMA is finding less and carrying out fewer operations. The signals that the government is giving to Europe this week are not positive in the sense of environmental protection. For example, the Minister of Environment was in Rondônia this week, together with deforesters. How the President intends to convince and show the world that the government is really concerned about the preservation of the Amazon. First, you have to understand that the Amazon belongs to Brazil, not to you. I repeat here, we preserve more than the whole world. No country in the world has the morals to talk about the Amazon.
The Supreme Court determined that the government should take all possible measures to find the journalist and the indigenous man and gave a period of 5 days for the actions to be detailed. Bolsonaro stated that dozens of people disappear every day and that the Supreme Court does not care about it. The disappearance had global repercussions. The United Nations qualified the searches as extremely slow.
We stress our concerns as to the wider context of constant attacks and harassment faced by human rights defenders, environmentalists, and journalists in Brazil.
Don Phillips' wife confirmed to the press on Monday that the embassy had confirmed that the 2 bodies found in Vale do Javari were those of the journalist and the indigenous man. But the federal police and the indigenous teams in the region denied the discovery. According to a report to the NGO Global Witness published in 2021, Brazil is the 4th country in murders of environmental defenders.
Ignacio Lemus y Julia Nasif para TeleSUR.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. In the early hours of Tuesday morning, the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities issued a statement on the arrest of the organization's president, Leonidas Issa Salazar.
Our declaration as an indigenous movement in the framework of the national strike would announce to the Ecuadorian people and our organizations the arbitrary and illegitimate detention of our top leader, President Leonidas Isa Salazar. We denounce the lack of knowledge of his whereabouts, and we hold the national government responsible for any act that attempts against his life and integrity.
Also, we have other information in this case. As we know, in response to their leader's arrest, the vice president of the organization called for a radicalization of the struggle on the second day of the indefinite national strike.
In the face of his illegal detention, the government makes it clear that it is a government that is not willing to listen to the people. Therefore, we call on all our organizational structures, people and indigenous nationalities of Ecuador to radicalize the struggle at the national level in defense of our agenda and of our maximum representative.
And on early morning, police arrested Leonidas Isa Salazar, the leader of the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador in the sector of Pasto Calle, where he had participated in the blockade of the Pan-American Highway in the sector known as El Chasqui. There, he was read his rights, both in Quechua and in Spanish, in which he was mentioned that he was being captured for the alleged crimes of rebellion and paralyzing public service.
Ya bajamos, ¿ves cómo me rompes el poncho? Hoy no me jalas el cabello tampoco. Venga, venga, ¿por qué me jalas el cabello? Venga, venga, vamos. Venga, aguanta, espera. Ya, baja, déjale caer. Espera, voy a bajar. Espera, voy a bajar. ¿Ves cómo me jalas el cabello? Venga, tranquilo. No me toques. No me toques. Ya. Al resto déjale. Déjale. Al carro.
Now we move on to other topics. The United States has imposed visa restrictions on dozens of Nicaraguan officials, accusing them of allegedly undermining democracy in the aftermath of President Daniel Ortega's successful re-election last year. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said that 93 officials, including judges, prosecutors, Interior Ministry officials, and also members of Nicaragua's National Assembly were targeted. The names of the people were not released. The State Department had previously imposed visa restrictions on 116 individuals linked to the Ortega government, including mayors, prosecutors, university administrators, as well as police, prison, and military officials. The Treasury Department has frozen the U.S. assets of the Defense Minister and other officials in the Army, telecom, and mining sectors, as with thousands of Nicaraguan officials already under sanctions. Ohio school districts will be able to begin arming employers under a bill signed into law Monday by Republican Governor Mike DeWine. The bill stipulates as sufficient a 24-hour training period for an employee to properly handle a gun, ensure school safety.
Bill 99, as you know, also addresses the option, and it is an option, to arm school personnel, although this bill was in the making long before the recent tragedy in Texas. That heartbreaking school shooting certainly prompted its enactment.
The United Kingdom government will submit to Parliament a bill allowing it to unilaterally amend the post-Brexit protocol for Northern Ireland. The executive, led by Prime Minister Boris Johnson, said the proposal aims to protect the integrity of the so-called Good Friday Agreements, which in 1998 put an end to the armed conflict in that British province. The so-called Northern Ireland Protocol was the formula found by London and Brussels to avoid the establishment of a physical border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland in the post-Brexit area. The measure provides, however, that all goods coming from Britain must be subject to customs and health checks to ensure that they comply with the European Union regulations. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. According to Burkinabe government spokesperson Lionel Bilgo, at least 50 civilians have died in an attack by suspected jihadists on a village in the north part of the country, describing the killings as a revenge attack. The high government official said the army has so far found 50 bodies after the village of Saintenga was attacked overnight. He also said that the death toll may rise. The West African state is in the grip of a 7-year-old jihadist insurgency that has claimed more than 2,000 lives and forced some 1.9 million people to flee their homes. The United Nations condemned the attack and it called on Burkina Faso's authorities to bring perpetrators to justice. At a press conference, the government spokesperson announced the army was deployed at the site and search for victims of the attack continues.
The army has been on the scene since yesterday. They began to search for victims or bodies as of this morning. The army had found 5 bodies at the entrance of Saintenga. After checking all houses, 50 bodies were found early in the afternoon and the search continues.
At the same time, Bilgo stated the death toll as a result of the attack may rise.
By air and land, the defense and security forces landed in Saintenga. The search continues house by house, area by area. Now it is a matter of saying that the death toll may be higher than the 50 bodies already found.
Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Saeed Khatibzadeh said on Monday that the recent anti-Iran resolution adopted by the International Atomic Energy Agency was politically charged and not based on the technical expertise. Such resolution, proposed by the United States, Britain, France, and Germany, accused Iran of non-cooperation. On Thursday, it was announced in Vienna that Iran had told the IAEA it was removing 27 surveillance cameras from its nuclear facilities. Khatibzadeh said Iran's suspension of part of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on the Iranian nuclear issue is reversible, but in keeping with the negative impact of U.S. sanctions, which appear to be irreversible. He also stressed that Iran's recent shutdown of some monitoring equipment is only a cessation of some voluntary measures and still complies with the relevant safeguards agreement previously reached with the IAEA.
Iran's nuclear measures are technically reversible if the Vienna Agreement is finalized tomorrow. But the economic terrorists and illegal unilateral sanctions imposed on Iran by the US and European countries cannot be reversed, nor can the pain and pressure inflicted on the Iranian people by US politicians, including Donald Trump.
TeleSUR expands its signal with new satellite parameters. Since more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are being heard in other farther away nations. These parameters are in place since June the 1st in Latin America and the Caribbean, both in English and in Spanish, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. This new multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. So we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.